For this next lesson, we're going to be taking a look at how we do exposure adjustment. If you go into the Photoshop Exercises folder and click on Rainbow, I just want you to open up the rainbow photograph in Photoshop. So just drag that down and wait till it turns dark and just open up the photograph. Now this is a picture I took when I first crossed the bridge in Prince Edward Island. Now let's just do Command 0 just to increase the size, and although it's a very nice photograph, what I'd like to do is enhance the photograph by making the sky a little bluer and the grass a little greener. And one of the best ways to start adjusting photographs when you're a beginner is to use what's called variations. Now this is one of the plugins that only works in 32-bit mode, and that's why I told you to turn it on, 32-bit mode. So if you click on variations and you take a look, you look at the different ways you can adjust the photograph. Now let's take a look at this window quickly first. Okay, first of all, we have the original photograph here, and then as you make changes, the changes will appear here. Currently these are identical. Okay, and again, current pick is also down here, which means that this is the way you've adjusted it. Now as you look all the way around here, these are the different color adjustments you can make. More yellow, more red, more magenta, etc. Okay, and it shows you what it's going to look like. And if you look at these carefully, they're actually awful because what's happened is you're adjusting what's called midtones. Very rarely do you adjust midtones because it is such a harsh adjustment. Okay, only if the photograph is very, very poor does a midtone adjustment sometimes work. Generally what we do is we adjust shadows and highlights. Okay, in this case, if we look at this photograph, we can generally assume that anything in the sky is going to be brighter than anything on the ground. Okay, just because this is where the sun is and this is generally where the light is coming from. Okay, so if we're going to adjust things, if we're going to adjust, say, the sky, that would be the highlights. And you notice now the adjustments are much more subtle. Okay, in this case, we're going to make the sky a little bit more blue. So if I click here, it makes the sky slightly more blue, but you also notice that the grass becomes a little bit bluer as well. Let's click on it one more time. Okay, and now we can see that the sky is definitely bluer than the original if you look at these two here. Okay, and I think that's probably about enough. Now on the shadow side, when we click here, and notice that these are becoming overexposed, okay, which is fine. Okay, now we're going to make the grass slightly greener, so I'm just going to click here. And I think that's actually good enough if you notice the color, the difference in the green color here. Okay. Now we might want to make it slightly darker just because it is the ground. Okay, and we can click down here. Okay. Now let's take a look at it. We click OK. Okay, now if you want to see the difference, you can click on your history button, which is here. Okay, and we can go from the opening photograph or the open photograph, both of them are the same. And then click next for variations, and you notice it's a bit more vibrant. It's actually quite a nice change. Okay, the green's a bit greener, the sky's a bit bluer. Okay, there are other adjustments that you can make, which is very interesting to make, and this involves dynamic range. Dynamic range is the range from white to black, and if you have a full dynamic range right from a solid black right to a solid white, it gives a much richer feel to the photograph. Let's see if we can do that here. So if we go to image adjustments, and we go to curves, okay, and that will bring up a dialog box that looks like this. Okay, now we can choose a black point and a white point, and what I try and do is trying to find a place that actually has a black and a white in it. Now in this case, I can see down here there's black and white definitely, or up here. Either one would work fine. Since this is larger, I'm going to zoom in here. So it'll be spacebar, command, and then I'm going to spot zoom in. Okay, and that's definitely a black point for me. So I'm going to click here, and I'll click here to choose a black point. Okay, notice there's a slight darkening of the entire picture, and then I'm going to choose a white point, which obviously this looks like the whitest point there. So I can click there. Okay, and then I'm just going to click OK, and then I'll go back. And it's hard to notice unless you can actually go into the history and take a look. So let's do that. We'll go from the opening scene, which now looks a little washed out in terms of it doesn't have quite the range or the vibrance of color. Now we go here, a little bit more vibrant color, and then let's look at the curves. and that increases the contrast. So now the sky was slightly lighter, these shadows are slightly darker. So if we look at the finished photograph now, significantly better than the original.